What did you find out after a first date that was a deal breaker?
She said she used heroin, but unlike most people, she could do it safely.
On the surface, he was a lawyer with an Ivy League degree. Then just one layer deep, he had 6 kids with 5 different women. One of his exes hated him so much he took their kids to Germany to get away from him. And the kicker? His youngest was 6 months old and he was sleeping on his ex's couch.
She was married. We met at a bar and left together. Went and had dinner, saw a movie, and she spent the night. The next morning she says, I wonder if my husband figured out I didn't come home. Then she asked me for a ride to work and I got a ticket because she didn't wear her seatbelt.
Met up for drinks and she started telling me about how she thought I'd get along with her brother. After a couple of drinks, we end up at the bar where her brother worked. Hell of a guy. We kept playing hair metal on the jukebox and drinking beers. She went from saying I would get along with her brother to I remind her of her brother. The more she drank, the more she said it. We ended up making out and she started repeating the shit about her brother while rubbing my crotch. I made sure she got home safe, but that shit creeped me out so much that I never spoke to her again.
The date went well. We just did the typical coffee and chat, then decided to go back to my place for a movie. As soon as we walked in the door he tried to shove his tongue down my throat, no warning. I backed away because he caught me off guard. He asked to use my bathroom. I thought more to escape embarrassment and to start over. He walked out completely naked, crawled onto my bed and spread his ass cheeks, asking me to eat his ass and talking about inviting his friends over for an orgy. I was so confused because while we were messaging I asked him about sex, like what he was into and looking for, and he said he didn't want to have sex on our first date.
That he had restraining orders against him from not 1, but 2 exes. Also asked if he could move in with me on the first date, smiley face.
My date kept trying to braid my hair, lol. At first, it seemed weird, but not like a deal breaker. But then he kept asking. The first time he asked, we were walking through the park, and I was telling a story. But he interrupted me, asking, can I please braid your hair? I laughed, politely said no, and continued talking. But he kept interrupting, asking to braid my hair. I asked why, but all he said was, I just want to braid it, and kept reaching for my head. I swatted his hand away a few times. And when that didn't work, I told him I was ready to go home. It was so creepy. He forgot to mention his 3 kids. Also, in the same breath said his ex was a psycho. When I questioned why he hadn't mentioned his kids before, he said it didn't matter because they lived full-time with their mom. I have divorced parents. Guess how I reacted? Another one kept talking about how he wanted 5 kids but didn't want to get married. I said that I wasn't down. Sorry. He countered with, but Europeans do it all the time. I was sitting there like, who the fuck sitting at this table is European? Because I sure as hell am not. IDKY, it's always about some kid-related issue. Maybe because they find out I work with children, so they think I'm like a dugger and or willing to accept a gaggle of other people's children. Not happening. He told me that he couldn't wait to have kids with me and that he had picked out our kids' names. When I told him that this was our first date and I wasn't sure about kids and that this was a super creepy thing to say to me, he insisted it was my duty as a woman and that it would make me very happy. Yeah, there was no second date. It was during the first date. He talked shit to a harmless homeless woman. I was close to home and dismissed myself immediately. He lost a pile of money in crypto and NFTs, but still tried to convince me to get my money into it. She had a date right after our date with her steady boyfriend. Not the next night. 5 minutes later, I had to drop her off at the next date. Like, why go out with me when you have a boyfriend? I didn't even try to kiss her, but she planted a big one on my lips to say goodbye. I read through the comments and expected to see so many trivial things. I went on a date with a woman I met while traveling for work. She mentioned her husband in passing the next morning. I said, "Wait, you're married?" To which she replied, "What he doesn't know won't hurt him." I was pissed. He referred to every woman in his life as a cunt. His ex-wife, his co-workers, his son's girlfriend, the ladies he came across at work. Correction officer. He must have used it 12 times in a 2-hour conversation. I think that's more than I've heard that word used in conversation in the previous 20 years combined. He was not British. There was no cultural slang going on. It was very off-putting. He was hung up on his ex to the point he wouldn't stop talking about her for the entire dinner. Oh. And he told me he was an alcoholic that still drinks and runs our meetings. He got drunk and I used his phone to Uber him a ride home. Technically this was after a second date, but I was so impressed that he'd treated me and the person who introduced us to sushi. I was 18 and he was 27. So I guess it just impressed me because most 18-year-olds can't just treat a group to sushi. But then he let slip that he'd paid for it all with his mom's credit card. He didn't have a job. Recovering addict. And his mom's credit cards were financing his whole life. So, it was a deal breaker. He had 2 ex-wives with kids and seemed way too eager for marriage number 3. Big old nope. He also happened to grow up in this sex commune I grew up near called Morehouse. He wouldn't kiss me until it was after we said, "I do." He asked me to pay for his court fees. That was my turn off, so I wanted to leave to end the date. I said my goodbyes. He threatened to tell the whole restaurant I was having an affair and cheated on him if I left. I stayed in fear of embarrassment. Excused myself to the restroom where I made my escape to the door. He saw me from the window. I saw him coming out. I ran a bit. Looked back to see him chasing me, loudly crying, loudly crying, loudly crying. He was a really bad magician. Brought cards and everything. Couldn't land a trick. I felt bad and took him up on a second date, but that was it. He told me his ex has like 7 multiple personalities. Also told me their names and ages. I might have been okay with him. But he has an 8-year-old son with her. So she's going to be in his life for a while. I don't need the drama. He kept telling me what to do. It seemed innocent at first. But after the 3rd or 4th time. Nah. Not doing this again. Date. 19M. Said his ex's parents hated him. I asked why. Turns out his ex was 13F. Gee, why would her parents have a problem with them dating? Here it is. Years later and I still feel like I need to shower after typing that. First date was great. What ended up being the deal breaker was what I learned on the second date. It was learning her purse contained morphine which she had stolen from the educational hospital she worked at in the Bronx in case her hangover from our date was bad. Also, she had watched a stab victim die on the table earlier that day and was acting very chill when she decided to tell me about it. Also, at the end of the date she told me, "You know, if you had been more of an asshole to me, I probably would have tried to sleep with you. You know, if stealing morphine and nonchalantly telling your date the second time you've met them about the murder victim you tried and failed to patch up wasn't enough for you." Edit. Man, I'm remembering a lot about this date. She also told the story of the last guy she went out with who upset her, so she called him a F at $$T, loudly in the restaurant they were in. She told this story rather loudly at the diner we ended up at for food later in the night. It was a long date. I was an idiot. I might still be an idiot. I dunno. I need a hug. Ask how much I make and what's in my bank account. They lied about their age. Said they were younger than they were to get me on the date. I wouldn't have cared about their age. But I did care about the lie. Her other guy showed up in the middle of our date. She said, "Can I talk with him for a minute?" I said, "Sure," then walked out the door and never looked back. She showed up in an outfit I describe as, "Shit, we need milk." Let me run to the gas station, and extremely late. She immediately asked if I wanted to get a room. Lol. Nope. That my date would not cut his toenails, that he would grow them on purpose because he would prefer using his toenails to scratch his legs. I don't have to bend down so often. I got to see them. Folks. I ran. She told me she was a Christian life coach. Then asked me what my personality type was and proceeded to try to tell me about who I was and why. Poor oral hygiene. He asked me to call his girlfriend to tell her we would be together now. She told me she smoked meth with her dad. Found his Twitter, and besides his online personality being hating on women and loving soccer, I saw a tweet about me. Regarding a comment I said about not liking a certain artist and how stupid he thought I was. Ghosted him immediately. I went to the washroom during our date. As people do. Afterwards, he texted me to ask if I was playing the "Hold It" game with him. I was puzzled. Turns out, PP fetish. Fine. Not my thing though. He tried to get me into it by sending me porn stories. Not fine. Like, have your kinks but don't force them on me or assume I'm playing some niche game. Lol. Homie wanted a threesome with his step-brother. He had no money to get home, and wanted to sleep at my place. Big nope, stranger. The chewing noises. He could list on the fingers of one hand the foods he would eat. He was a great guy, but I couldn't even imagine a second date because I like to eat in restaurants. And we'd used up the one local place that he would tolerate any of the dishes from. She was a drug addict. Shit sucked. Really cool girl. Got along well. Lots of chemistry. Pill problem. I tried to fix her, and it turns out she didn't like my older kid. Kid wasn't even 5. Had to cut that shit off.